Hello and welcome to another Danny Phantom review. We made it, guys. Today we are taking a look at the final episode of the series, the big two-parter at the end of season 3, the big ol' finale TV movie, Phantom Planet. Oh boy, this is a big one. There's a lot that happens in this. I have a lot of notes. I was kind of holding off on recording this for a couple days because I wanted to give myself a chance to kind of reflect on this episode after rewatching it. As well as I kind of didn't really want to do this episode right away because this is the last episode of the show. And like all good things, they must eventually come to an end, and so doing a video on this episode means that the show is over, and that's really sad. And I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway from this episode is it is kind of a mess, but which we'll get into. But my biggest emotional takeaway from this episode is that it's such a hard finale, a hard end to this show. Which is good and bad. It's nice that they did actually get to do a finale episode. There's a lot of shows that just either straight up end on a cliffhanger and then they never get resolved, or they just kind of end wrapping up the season without like a chance to wrap up the story as a whole. And so the fact that this show actually does get to at least attempt to wrap everything up is kind of cool. But again, it means that the show is over and that there can never be any more, which is also really frustrating. This episode reminds me the most of Serenity, the movie / wrap-up finale thing of Firefly. Firefly, of course, excellent sci-fi series that lasted one season before it got canceled prematurely. But one of the things that is so tragic but also so endearing about that show is that it only had one season. And because of that, there are no bad episodes. You know, the show never went on for too long. It never went past its prime. It never jumped the shark. It never got bad at any point because it only had that one season. And so there was many unanswered questions and unanswered storylines and stuff like that. But for a while, all you could have done is speculate and wonder what might have been like to see more Firefly. And then eventually they did the movie Serenity, and they wrapped it up, which is cool. It's a really good movie. It does a really good job of wrapping everything up and giving you more of the thing you like. However, at the same time, it's also very sad because it puts a definitive end on many of your favorite characters, as well as a lot of the big conflicts and questions from the series. It gives you this sort of bittersweet feeling at the end of it. It's cool that it happened and that you got to see these characters again, but it's also incredibly sad because it means now you have to say goodbye to them for real. And that's kind of how I feel about this finale, for the most part. There are things I like about it, there are things that I don't like about it, which we will definitely get into. But ultimately, it's just kind of this bittersweet, sad kind of feeling, because it means that we have to say goodbye to these characters. So I guess let's sort of get into the plot of this episode. It's a long-ass episode, and I have a lot of things to say, so here we go. The episode starts out with a bang. We get this epic CG title card, which I think is kind of cool. Flying through space, and we get the words Phantom Planet. That's right, we're going to space in this series finale because why not? There are some thematic things that would give a good reason for this show to go to space. Danny wants to be an astronaut. That's kind of one of his dreams and aspirations that they bring up every once in a while. That's not really a huge part of this episode, though. It's kind of a like, that would be big and climactic, right? If we went to space, it's like, I guess so. Anyways, they have a brief encounter with Vlad. There's some weird looking CG that doesn't fully work, in my opinion. It's hard to integrate CG in hand-drawn stuff. I'm not gonna give it too many negative points just for that. They also bring up the infinite map, whatever the fuck from the earlier episode about the magic ghost zone map. That comes back here. They have a brief encounter with Vlad, and it doesn't really matter other than they set up this big old ghost meteor. Yeah, there's a ghost meteor in this episode. That's the main conflict. But then we kind of move away from that. And this is, I think, one of the first thing that sticks out as really weird to me with this episode. It's a two-parter, sort of, right? It's a double-length episode. I don't remember if it actually aired in 2 parts or not. But the point is, it's twice the length of a normal episode, which is fine, and that's good for a big finale. But what's weird is the first half of the episode is kind of about something completely different and almost entirely irrelevant to the second half of the episode. So yes, we do set up the ghost meteor and some of the space stuff in the opening sequence, but after that, there's like 20, I wrote it down somewhere, there's over 20 minutes of no mention of space stuff whatsoever. And it's about a completely different, unrelated conflict, which is Vlad is the mayor of the town, and this is one of the few episodes of season 3 that actually brings that up and does something with it. Because he's the mayor, he's bringing forth this new initiative of these new tech-using teens called Masters Blasters, because of Vlad Masters. They're this government-sanctioned ghost-fighting teen team that's there to fight ghosts better than Danny Phantom, and they're there to make him look bad and ineffective. And so the conflict is that Danny feels like he's not very useful since these Masters Blasters are being more effective ghost fighters than he is, and so he's kind of wishing that he never even had powers to begin with. There's this weird kind of montage where Danny's trying even harder to stop ghosts, but then the ghost defeats him and blasts him with something, and then he's in his underwear. Haha, that's funny. And then the Masters Blasters like actually successfully defeat the ghost. It's a weird sequence, and it doesn't really make much sense if you think about it at all, because we've never seen Danny get blasted into his underwear before while he's in his ghost form, because that's not how that works, as far as we know. It's just like a goofy cartoon thing that happens. It is sort of in tone with season 3, but again, not really in tone with the rest of the show. And it's sort of that weird season 3 pacing where we're moving from things really quickly. The Masters Blasters show up. Danny's trying to deal with that. Then partway through this, Danny decides to give up his powers, and suddenly the episode's about that. His parents are working on the ghost portal, and it's sort of in this like construction, half-finished state. A similar state that it was in when Danny first got his powers, so he figures if he goes into it again, he might be able to reverse polarity or whatever and get rid of his powers, which he does. And then the episode is sort of about that, about what if Danny gave up his powers and didn't have them for a while. They also do this thing that is kind of weird where his hair gets this like white streak in it, but it looks kind of weird because of the way that Butch Hartman style draws these characters, where it's like always on a diagonal, but it's unclear, like, except for in 1 or 2 shots where I think they like rotate around him, how exactly the diagonal works, because like every time he turns his head it's like a different direction. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. So now the episode is about Danny giving up his powers while the Masters Blasters are you know, doing their thing fighting ghosts. Meanwhile, Vlad has nefarious purposes for the Masters Blasters. They start charging people for ghost fighting and stuff like that. He's obviously up to something. And this is the point where I kind of realized that this episode is kind of the plot of Spider-Man Far From Home. Because like these new characters show up and they're like, oh, we're using this technology to help fight the bad guys. We're definitely not evil, but it's clear to us that they're definitely up to no good, or at least working for the bad guy that we know is up to no good. And then the main guy decides to give up their abilities or whatever, or their drone AI thing, which of course was the villain's plan all along, to make it look like they were so much better at being the hero than the main hero was, that the hero ends up giving up their powers or whatever. It's sort of the plot of Far From Home for a little bit. But yeah, Danny enjoys not having powers for a little bit. We had a somewhat similar to Spider-Man 2 raindrops keep falling on our head montage type moment. But Danny's friends are kind of real jerks about this whole situation. It's kind of weird and out of character. At first it's like, no, don't give up your powers. You've been able to do so much good with them. We've gone on so many adventures together. You shouldn't give up just because these other people seem to be doing better than you are. But then it like kind of quickly devolves to Danny being like, yeah, isn't this great? Now I don't have powers. We can actually hang out together like normal teenagers. And they're like, yeah, but you were way cooler when you had like superpowers and stuff. And I don't know if I really want to hang out with you now that you're lame and normal. And it's like, what the fuck? Jeez. I don't know. It's a weird moment. His friends act kind of out of character. I just forget to mention that the music is really solid in this episode. It definitely feels like they're trying extra hard to make every moment feel big and momentous. So yeah, now we're like 23 minutes or so into this episode, and finally they bring back the ghost meteor. They remembered the thing from the very start of the episode. So it turns out the big ghost meteor that exists somehow is coming straight towards Earth, and it's gonna blow up the whole planet if it hits it. Now we're dealing with that. Forget about the last 20 minutes of, oh, is Danny gonna give up his powers? These Masters Blasters sure seem to be doing a better job than him. Fuck all that. There's a ghost meteor. It's gonna blow up the whole Earth. Yeah, so this episode is very strangely paced. My guess as to what happened, and my only real evidence to support this, is the list of like 40 storyboard artists that worked on this episode. Other than that, I know that at some point along the way, they did realize they were getting canceled and that they should wrap things up. But there's very little about season 3 that even attempts to wrap anything up, except for the last 2 episodes. The one before this kind of actually wraps some stuff up with Danielle and Valerie and some of her plot with Vlad and all that stuff. And then this episode that kind of tries to wrap up everything. But other than that, the rest of the season doesn't really attempt to wrap up anything at all. My guess as to what was going on here is that the first half of this episode was originally a different episode where Vlad has a plot about trying to make the Masters Blasters and try to trick Danny into giving up his powers, and then we do an episode about what if Danny didn't have his powers. And then they just kind of combined that with the ghost meteor plot that they decided was the big finale episode plot to stretch it out into 2 episodes. Because most of that stuff has nothing to do with the ghost meteor stuff, which is the big finale stuff that the main rest of the episode is about. It's a mess. It's very weird, and that's the only thing I can think of that would kind of explain why the episode is like that, why it feels like it's 2 different episodes slapped together, because it maybe was at one point. Yes, there's that one scene at the very beginning that kind of sets up the ghost meteor and stuff, but like, other than that one scene, it's not really part of the plot until 23 minutes into the episode. Okay, so now we're dealing with the ghost meteor that's coming towards Earth, and it's gonna destroy the entire world. And the rest of the episode is just kind of about them trying to figure out how to stop this thing. At first, Jack ends up going into space with some kind of Fenton rocket or whatever, and he's gonna try to blow up the meteor. But Vlad sabotages Jack's ship, and Jack ends up missing, blowing up a different meteor that was unrelated. So now Jack looks like a failure, and Vlad then reveals his big major plan. You ready? He reveals his identity to the entire world as the slightly more evil named Vlad Blasmius. And he's going to hold the world for ransom because now that Danny doesn't have his powers, Vlad is the only one who is potentially powerful enough to stop this ghost meteor, and he will only stop the meteor if everyone agrees to appoint him supreme ruler of the world and also give him
$1 million.
It's very dumb, because if he's already in charge of the world, why does he also need $1 billion or whatever the number that he says is? It's cartoonish and dumb and goofy, which is fine. It's a cartoon. Shut up. Why do you care? Good point. But it's just like Vlad is this complex villain who really just wants to be loved and wants a family and stuff, and then it's like, nah, he's goofy and he wants to take over the whole world and whatever. It's so much goofier and dumber than the rest of the show before this season. It's just kind of like, that's kind of dumb. So then Vlad goes into space with Jack. Vlad's gonna try to use his powers to make the meteor intangible so that it would just phase through the Earth. Jack has a moment with Vlad that I kind of actually like, where he's like, oh man, you were a dick this whole time? But I was your biggest fan. And he like kind of feels betrayed by him and stuff. And moments like this, that even though we get to them in a very stupid way, are kind of nice, because it's kind of cool and cathartic to see Jack finally realize that Vlad's a dick. You know, like those kind of big like finale moments are kind of cool to see, even if we get to them in like a weird, dumb way. This is also essentially the plot of an Astonishing X-Men story, where there's a big bullet that's going to hit the Earth, and then Kitty Pryde, who could go intangible, phases through the bullet and makes it phase straight through the Earth so that it doesn't hit it. And that's the same exact plot here, kind of. So Vlad tries to phase the ghost meteor, but it's made of some kind of ghost element, which they have a dumb name for, and I can't remember it, but I'll put it here.
Asteroid composed entirely of unique anti-ghost element, ectoranium.
And he can't affect it. So his plan doesn't work, and now they're back to square one. What do we do? Jack just kind of leaves Vlad out in space, which is kind of a cool moment of like, yeah, Jack, fuck him, because he sucks. And it's cool that Jack finally kind of realizes, like, yeah, fuck that guy. So now they're back to square one. What do we do? How are we gonna stop this? Well, don't worry, because Danny has a plan. His plan is to get every ghost in the ghost zone to come help them and phase the Earth so the Earth isn't tangible, so that when the ghost meteor comes, the meteor just goes straight through the Earth. The meteor might not be intangible, but the Earth would be, and then it would be safe. Why would this plan work when Vlad's plan is essentially the same thing and it failed? Because the meteor was made of ghost radium or whatever, and just Vlad couldn't affect it. So why would ghosts be able to affect the Earth and how essentially the same way and have that work? I don't know. Spoilers, this plan works, but the other one didn't. Okay, so then Danny sits out in the Fenton car that can go in the ghost zone. I forget what it's called. The Spectre Speeder, I remembered. I think it's that. So Danny's going to the ghost zone to try to capture every ghost from the ghost zone and get them to help him with his plan. He comes in contact with Skulker and a bunch of his other villains. There's a cool shot in this moment somewhere around this point where we get this like big spinny shot where Danny sees like all of his ghost villains, which is really cool. Anyways, they attack Danny and they all blast him with their ghost rays, and they blast him so hard that the rays go all the way into his DNA and he gets his ghost powers back. Even though, as far as we know, that's not how the ghost rays work. It just kind of is some kind of energy blast. But here it gives Danny his powers back. Now, maybe there's some bullshit about he already had the powers dormant within his DNA somewhere, and so being exposed to this much ghost energy just reignited the power that was already kind of inside of him a little bit. They don't attempt to explain any of it. They just shoot him with a bunch of lasers, and then they zoom in on his DNA, and he has his powers again, because he needs to have his powers so the rest of the episode could happen. So then Danny manages to convince all of the ghosts, mostly just Skulker, because he's the one that we see the most often, to help him, because the ghost zone and the regular world are dimensionally connected, so if one of them explodes, the other one will go as well. They did actually set this up in an earlier episode, which, other than that one plot point, is kind of redundant. It's the one where Danny's family becomes rich and the guys in white try to explode the ghost zone. That plot point kind of comes back here. And so the ghosts have reluctantly agreed to help Danny because the regular world goes and the ghost zone also goes. Although that one's kind of weird because in the other one, they were going to blow up the ghost zone, which is a dimension of some kind. And they said, oh, if that dimension goes, then it'll disrupt the regular dimension that we're from. Sure. But if the planet Earth goes, the ghost zone goes? Is that how that works? Because like there's other planets that are exploding all the time in our dimension, but it's just like irrelevant to us. But the ghost zone is specifically tied to Earth. It doesn't matter, and it's just to get the ghosts to help. It doesn't matter. It's stupid nonsense. It's a dumb cartoon, and that's this episode. It's dumb. So all the ghosts are now going to help Danny, which is kind of cool in a couple shots. But then in most of the shots, we just see Skulker and a bunch of faceless ghosts, and it's like you drew them all in that one cool shot, but only some of the time in the other shots that's less cool. Especially for this big finale episode where like one of the cool things about it is that we get to see all the characters again. Although for the most part they do actually bring back a lot of stuff and a lot of the characters that we hadn't seen in a while. Technus makes an appearance earlier in the episode. He even actually has lines. Same with the lunch lady, which is cool. They even bring back other elements, like at one point they disguise the Tucker bot as Danny to fool Danny's parents, which is from, again, that episode with the guys in white where Danny's family became rich, they got robots, and that actually came back in this episode. So it's kind of nice that they actually remembered stuff from earlier in the season, as well as, like, you know, the Ghost Zone map comes back. They use that to get into the Ghost Zone at one point. They also bring back the class ring that Danny's dad gave him to give to Sam way back from season 2, I think, which then becomes a big plot point because Danny and Sam get together in this episode. Yay! We've kind of been teasing the will they won't they a little bit more this season, sort of building that up a little bit more, so it sort of kind of makes sense that that would sort of happen in this episode. It's fine. If you know me, I'm Team Valerie all the way. Yeah, Danny and Sam get together. I don't know. I don't have a lot of, like, big feelings on that. Like, normally this would be fine. Like, I think there's a moment where Danny's about to go into Ghost Zone to try to recruit the ghosts. And Sam's like, be careful, Danny. Also, this class ring, blah, blah, blah. And then they kiss. I think that moment's fine. It's also kind of fun. They get, like, this big, spinny camera shot that doesn't quite make sense if you break down the layers of what's moving, but don't think about it too hard. It's kind of cool. It's more kind of at the end of the episode where they sort of establish that, like, they're together now. End of show. That's, like, a little bit frustrating. Most of the time it's fine to end your show with, like, the will they won't they couple getting together. Kim Possible sort of does that, except not really, because Ron and Kim were together for, like, a whole season. Just sort of the finality of the way they do it is kind of like to me. Would Danny and Sam get together at some point? Yes, probably. But I'm not confident that they necessarily have enough in common to, like, stay together forever, especially since they're only 14. The Jello Apocalypse video kind of put it best.
Danny and Tam secretly have feelings for one another because they're protagonists. Hey, it's a good thing they don't have chemistry class together or they'd be failing.
So Danny and all the characters and all the ghosts from the Ghost Zone get together. They put all these wires around the entire Earth, which apparently helps them make it intangible somehow. And all the ghosts from every ghost ever from the Ghost Zone gets together on this big pole that has all the wires attached to it, and they use their energy to phase that, which connects to the entire Earth, which phases the whole Earth and makes it intangible. The meteor passes through it. The day is saved, and they did it. Everyone did it. Good work. Ghosts all kind of go back to the Ghost Zone. Then Danny has this moment with his parents, which I mostly like. During the big climactic final moments, Danny's parents kind of put it together that Danny Phantom is their son. And so Danny reveals his identity to his family, and they have kind of a nice moment of, like, of course we love you, and sorry we didn't notice before, kind of thing. It's sort of like what we saw in an earlier episode with the Infinity Gauntlet and Freak Show, where we saw what it would be like if Danny got his identity revealed a little bit. It's kind of like that moment, but I do like the idea of Danny's family figuring it out in the finale. I think that's a cool moment and a cool idea. But what's weird to me about this moment is that not only does he reveal his identity to his family, who had already kind of figured it out at that point, but also to everyone, just everyone, the whole world, I guess. Everyone else that was just kind of around, also, he revealed his identity to them, too. For reasons. I guess he knew the show was ending, because now everyone just knows who he is. Look, Valerie's there in her brief cameo. Yeah, Valerie's kind of in this episode. She has, like, a couple really brief moments. She has no lines. You think she would, since she's a main important character of the series. And they did remember to draw her, but yeah, she doesn't really do anything. She's just kind of around in a couple shots. And now Danny's identity is just kind of out. These kind of things that are sort of frustrating to me because they're so, like, final. Which is the point. It's the end of the show. Danny's identity is revealed. Vlad's identity is also revealed, and he's defeated basically for good. I mean, he's in space. He could theoretically come back, but, like, probably won't. Danny and Sam are now together. Will they be together forever? Yes. According to us, the show. Danny's family knows, and so does everyone else. all the dramatic tensions of the show are resolved, which is fine, but it also means that we can't really get any more show. Or at least if they did, they'd really have to focus on a bunch of new ideas. Tucker then becomes mayor of the town, because Vlad's gone, so they need a new mayor. Why not Tucker? 14-year-old boy. Yeah, sure. I guess we gotta give him some kind of sense of finality. Why not make him the mayor? Something which Tucker has not shown any interest at all throughout the series. Unless you count the episode King Tut, where he becomes an Egyptian pharaoh, which I don't. Well, at least I don't count that as set up for Tucker becoming the mayor at the end of the show. Just like a random, like, is this an idea? Is this something? I don't know. It's just a weird moment. This episode is full of those. And that's it. They've saved the day. They can all kind of rest and be happy. Danny and Sam get to be together. Some of their moments I kind of like. Just the idea of, like, what do we do now? I don't know. Just we'll see what the future has to hold. Like those kind of moments, I kind of like just the idea of this is it. This is the end of the show. What does that mean going forward? Who knows? It's a mystery. Who knows what tomorrow will hold, kind of thing. Today is over, but there's always tomorrow, and I like that sentiment, but none is quite as good as the final line of the series.
Cool statue. Personally, I would have made it out of recycled materials, but, you know, that's just me.
The perfect ending line of the Danny Phantom franchise. That's kind of the end of the show. They saved the day from the ghost meteor. Ta-da! Vlad is sort of defeated / in space somewhere. Danny and Sam got together. Danny revealed his identity. There will no longer be any more show. Here are some questions / plot points that were never resolved or addressed in this finale. Danielle Phantom, Danny's female clone / cousin, who got a big development episode, the one right before this, and then just didn't appear in this finale at all. Frostbite. I think he has a brief, like, we see him in one of the wide shots where they show, like, a bunch of the ghosts, but, like, surprisingly not really in this episode. Like, he doesn't have any lines or anything. You'd think he might show up in this one, since he's been kind of a mentor figure for Danny a little bit this season, at least in a couple episodes. You'd think in the big epic finale episode, that might be something that they bring back. He also had a whole thing where the Yeti ghosts had prophesized that Danny was, like, the savior of the ghost zone or whatever, which I think they said was because he defeated the Ghost King, but also now would be the time to bring it up, the time that Danny kind of saves the entire planet from getting destroyed from a ghost meteor. Evil Danny from the future that's time displaced in the ghost zone somewhere. Remember that? I do. Never came up again. Oh well. Valerie. Great character. Barely in this episode. Doesn't have any lines. Basically just has a cameo. I wish that they did anything with her this episode. She had a cool moment at the end of the last one where they were setting up that she was going to have some kind of big confrontation with Vlad now that she had finally figured out that he was actually evil and manipulating her this whole time. Cool moment, leads to nothing. Who were these mysterious hooded ghosts that we saw in that one episode about the Ghost King? I don't know. I just want to know more about them. And how come Paulina didn't get a moment where she finally realized that Danny was the ghost boy? If he's gonna reveal his identity to everyone, why not have that be part of it? Yeah, this episode is not very good. Mostly, I think it's just kind of extremely messy. Like I said before, the first half, where Danny is thinking about giving up his powers, there's these Masters Blasters running around. Basically unrelated to the big bad ghost meteor plot that happens. The ghost meteor plot is dumb. It's also very weird with the stakes, because they're like, oh no, the entire world is gonna get destroyed. which would feel like big stakes. There hadn't already been a bunch of episodes this season where a big bad ghost shows up that's the biggest, baddest ghost we've ever seen and threatens to destroy the entire town. Yes, obviously the world is bigger than the town, but because we never really leave the town of Amityville in Danny Phantom, the world of the show is essentially just that town. So the world getting destroyed and the town getting destroyed, the stakes are kind of the same. There was also one episode where the guys in white just kind of casually almost destroyed the entire ghost zone, which would have wiped out our entire reality. So that episode technically had bigger stakes, and it's a meaningless episode otherwise. Compared to like other episodes like The Ultimate Enemy that have extremely high emotional stakes as well, this one not really. There's some stuff kind of where like Danny and Sam sort of get together because they think that they might die in this episode. I don't know, they're trying a little more with it. This is the big one, so there's a little more like emotional moments kind of. But mostly I think this episode is just kind of very goofy and dumb. And so like even when more emotional moments do kind of happen, don't really hit home very well. This episode does remember a lot of stuff, but it also forgets about lots of stuff, including important characters like Danielle and Valerie, who you'd think would be crucial players in the big finale episode that's going to bring back everything. And the big threat, this ghost meteor, is very dumb and has not been set up at all. It's also, again, kind of this frustrating thing because it puts such a solid, like, ending, the end label on the series where Danny and Sam are now together, his identity is revealed, Vlad is defeated for good, essentially. Then it's kind of like, yeah, where would you go if you ever did a season 4? I'll tell you where I would go and think in the description of my pitches for season 4. But without just like bringing in completely new ideas, you couldn't just continue the series in the same way that it was before. Again, kind of like with Firefly, after Serenity, you can't continue the series how it was before, after that show. They kill off main characters. The status quo is irreparably changed. The case is the same here with Phantom Planet. You couldn't continue the show in the same way after this point. Dan and Sam are now together. You can't lean on that is they won't they anymore. His identity is out. The main whole conflict and tension of the series, except for season 3 when they kind of forgot about that, of like him having to balance his normal life with his ghost fighting stuff. And will his parents find out? Is his teachers going to find out? All that stuff gone. This whole season has been a lot of Danny fighting ghosts and not a lot of Danny dealing with normal high school problems. And that's really the core of what I like about the show, is it's about a regular kid who deals with regular everyday issues while also having superpowers and having to balance supernatural ghost fighting. That's what's fun about the show, and it's been so long since we've had that as an element of the series. Sometimes this final episode feels less like we're wrapping everything up and more just kind of the inevitability of the slow death of the show. I think the frustration that I have with this episode comes back to sort of the reason that I was sort of hesitant to even make this video in the first place. Simply that it's the last episode of Danny Phantom. After this one, it's over. Not only that, but it doesn't leave much room for more. It kind of definitively puts an end to the series. So the show ends, and it doesn't have a clear way that it gets to live on in some other form either. Series that end on like a cliffhanger, for example, can always endlessly speculate about what might have happened if it continued. Where this show was sort of unclear as to the future of the series. What's frustrating about it is just that it ended. And I like the show, but now it's done. And I'm still kind of in quarantine. So what am I going to do with my time now that I don't have any more episodes of Danny Phantom to talk about? But life goes on, and we'll have to do something else with our time, I guess. And I guess that's sort of my main takeaway from this finale episode. Other than, yes, it's a bit of a mess. But mostly I'm just kind of sad that this show I really, really like came to an end. And yeah, that's kind of about it. I don't know what the future holds for this franchise. Will there ever be any kind of revival? I have no idea. Will I continue to make videos about this show anyways? Yeah, probably. I have a couple ideas in mind, so stay subscribed. There's also other stuff that I want to make videos about too, so I'm not going anywhere. But in terms of reviewing each episode individually, I've done it. I've done all the episodes of the show. So that brings us to a close. I guess all I can do is leave you with some words of wisdom. And so I will leave you with this. Cool statue. Personally, I would have made it out of recycled material. But hey, that's just me.